Is this really the book that y'all voted for the Goodreads Choice Awards? Did I get a different book? Like what? Hey guys, it's Tahira and today I'm starting a new reading vlog. So the theme of this reading vlog is reading 2023 hyped books that I never read in 2023. Basically, there's a few books that came out in 2023 slash got popular in 2023 that everyone was hyping up, was raving about, that I never got to. So I'm taking the time today to get to some of these books that I've been wanting to read for a little bit. So the books that I will be reading in this vlog is, the first one is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. My bookmark is in it, but I haven't actually started this book yet, but I am really excited for this one. I've heard so many great things about how this is a really great like romance book, so if I don't like it, I'm gonna be really sad. The second book I'm gonna be reading is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This one is a fantasy romance book that got super popular last year, and everyone was raving about how cute and how good the romance was in it, and like the main couple. I don't know, I've just heard so many like great things about it and I'm really excited to read it. And then the last book that I am hoping will come sometime in the near future, because I have it on hold from the library and there's actually like a lot of holds on it, but that is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This one is a contemporary novel. It was really popular when it came out. It was like on, I don't know if it won, but it was on the best books list for Goodreads for 2023, and a lot of people really enjoyed it. R.F. Kuang is an author that a lot of people have talked about, and I have been interested in reading her work. I haven't read anything by her, but I've been really interested in her like fantasy books, the Poppy War trilogy, and then Babel, which is like a dark academia book. But this one is a contemporary one that got really popular. It came out last year. I've heard mixed reviews about Yellowface because that one people say is a lot of it has to do with fandom culture and Twitter discourse, and it felt like the author was like self-inserting herself into the main character. But yeah, I'm really excited for all of these books. My library says that I'm number 11 right now for Yellowface out of 14 copies, because I reserved the ebook to be able to read on my Kindle, because I don't actually have access to my home state library because I'm in a different state for university right now, but hopefully that comes in soon. I will be reading Divine Rivals on Kindle Unlimited. I don't actually have a copy of that book. The only copy that I have of any of these books is The 7-Year Slip. Anyways, the first book that I will be reading, as evidenced by my bookmark that's already on the first page, is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. So this one is about a woman, I guess, named Clementine West, and she is a very practical woman, and she's a book publicist. And then one day she moves into her late aunt's apartment and she finds a man there. It seems like it's a man that she thinks she might fall for, but she finds out that this man is actually 7 years in the past and that she's like 7 years in the future. Something to do with time travel, and this is some sort of like magical apartment that exists like between times, something to do with time. But yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about this. I'm hoping that I really enjoyed it, because I so far have not given any 5 stars in 2024 and I've already read like 10 books. So I'm really hoping that I can really enjoy this one, because if I don't, I will be, as I said, I'll be really sad. But yeah, I will start reading 7-Year Slip very shortly, and I will let you know my thoughts as I'm reading it. Hello. It is a whole week later. I feel like I am kind of in a reading slump a little bit ever since I finished House of Flame and Shadow. I have just not been super in the mood to read. Like, I feel like before that book I was like super into reading, wanted to read all the time, and then I read that book and then I read another thriller in like 2 days. So I don't know if it's just because I've just been reading a lot the past like couple of months, I guess, but I was kind of in a reading slump. So I only am on page 166 of The 7-Year Slip, so I read about 166 pages in a week, which usually I can read more than that, but it's fine. Life happens. I've just not been in the mood to reading, and I feel like forcing myself to read more would just make me not want to read, so I just was reading when I felt like it. But I am freaking loving this book so much. Like, honestly, it's probably gonna be like a high 4 or like a 5 star. Honestly, I'm just loving it so much, and I'm so happy with that, because I have just not been super loving every book that I've read so far in 2024, and I've been in kind of like a 5-star, not drought, because like it hasn't been that long, but usually I feel like I give out more 5 stars than I have. So I'm just really hoping that this continues to be as great as it has been. So in the story so far, Clementine has kind of figured out the whole magical apartment situation. She's met the other main character, who is the male love interest, and they've kind of just been talking and getting to know each other in this like magical apartment. It's just them been like bonding and stuff, and I can truly like feel their chemistry, and I just really love the way they talk. And also the other male love interest, he is a chef, and he loves to cook and everything, so he has just such a way of words when it comes to like describing foods and flavors and just things surrounding food and cooking. So I've just been really enjoying reading that, which is one of my favorite parts about this book. I just really love the writing, not just like about like surrounding the cooking and food and everything, but just the way it's written and the way things are described. I'm just loving it so much. Just truly beautiful writing in my opinion, and I'm just really enjoying the story as well. I don't know, I kind of want to just keep reading and see what happens, because so far they have kind of just been talking in like the magical apartment, and she has now, because they're 7 years, okay, I guess I don't really know how much I can talk about this book, because like it's the magical apartment. When she goes in, she meets him, but it's like 7 years in the past, so she's like 7 years in the future for him, and he's 7 years in the past for her. So I don't really know what I can really say about this book, but yeah, all I'm gonna say is that they have met in like their real life. So like she met in the apartment 7 years ago, and then in her real life 7 years in the future she has met him again. There's always like a third act conflict that happens in these romance books, and I really don't know what it's gonna be for this one. I just hope it's not something cliche and that brings down my enjoyment of the book, because a lot of times I feel like there's like miscommunication, which I feel like can be solved pretty easily. Like, I don't know, I feel like miscommunication is frustrating, because it's just like, oh, if you had talked you wouldn't be in this situation. But yeah, I'm loving this book, guys. I'm just loving it. I'm gonna keep reading today. I don't think I have too much going on, so I'm hoping to read a lot of this book, and then I will update you probably when I'm almost finished, or when I have finished this book. So I finished the 7 Year Slip last night, and I give it 5 stars. This is my first 5-star of the year so far, so like my 11th book is my first 5-star, which I feel like has never happened before, so that's exciting. Honestly, I was not expecting to like this book as much as I did. I truly loved this book so much. The story was so like magical with the whole apartment thing. I really liked that aspect of the book, and the ways that they have kind of interacted throughout time. And there's this one quote in the book that's kind of the main I guess premise, or it kind of sums up the book, which is like, it's not a matter of time but a matter of timing. So yeah, we follow these two people as they've been kind of interacting in different timelines, sometimes knowing each other, sometimes not knowing each other. So it's just a really great dynamic, and I really loved that part of the book. Also, the writing is just, it's so good. Not just like, as I said, the food and the way that Yuan talks about food is just so magical. The way he thinks about food, about how it connects people, about how it's not just about like what you're eating, it's about who you're sharing it with, it's about the different flavors, different parts of the dish. Just, it was so good. It was just an incredible way to describe things, and just the general writing style overall for the other parts of the book were also just so beautiful. And I am so excited to read Ashley Poston's new novel. I think it's called A Novel Love Story, that's coming out I think this year, so I'm really excited, because if it's adult, I'm sure I'm gonna really love it, because so far I've been really loving her writing style. And I love that it's not just about the relationship between Ewan and Clementine, I don't really know how to say it, but it's also about Clementine trying to find her footing in the world, trying to figure out how she fits into everything, figuring out what she wants to do, which is like very relatable as someone who's like graduating college, trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. And also it talks a lot about grief, which I also really enjoyed, because she inherits her late aunt's apartment, which is like the magical apartment, and she's kind of coping with dealing with the loss of her aunt who meant so much to her. They used to spend so much time together, they used to travel everywhere together, so this is a huge loss for her. And so I really loved the conversations I had about grief and dealing with the loss of someone who's so close to you. So yeah, overall I just loved all parts of this book, the writing, the story, the themes and discussions that it talked about. It was just, I don't know, it like connected to me in a way that I didn't think it would connect. I don't know, it's just connected to me in a way that I wasn't expecting at all. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons I'm giving it 5 stars, because if I'm really feeling that like deep connection with the book, and since I liked it, it's because before I was like 4 stars, 5 stars, I didn't know what to rate it, but now that I've thought about it for like a day, it's just such a deeply connected story to me now that I kind of have to just give it 5 stars. But yeah, I will definitely probably be reading this sometime in the future, not immediately obviously, but this will be a book that I'll probably come back to time and time again, just to drink in the story again. The only like critique I have that I've seen other people talk about that didn't really hinder my enjoyment of the book, obviously because I gave it 5 stars, was the fact that Iwan and Clementine's relationship didn't develop that much when they met for the first time in the magical apartment, because Clementine enters the apartment, she sees him, and they kind of just hit it off immediately, and they kind of just fall in love immediately as well. There's not really a lot of development of their relationship in that regard, but it didn't hinder my enjoyment of the story, and I still really enjoyed it, and I'm just so happy that I really liked this book. But yeah, now I'm really excited for her new book that's coming out later this year, I think. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but I will definitely be picking that up and reading that when it comes out. So I'm like 150 pages into Divine Rivals, and my experience reading this book has been quite interesting. It took me a while to get into this book, not gonna lie. When I first started it, I thought the plot was a completely different story. I thought the book was completely different. I thought it was 2 people on opposite sides of a war corresponding with each other, but then I realized that is actually, this is how you lose the time war, and this is actually about 2 rival journalists who are working in the city called Oath, and they are kind of competing for becoming the new columnist for the newspaper. They both work at the newspaper, and they kind of just start writing letters to each other through this like magical wardrobe typewriter thing. I don't know, it's like weird, and it wasn't a lot of magic actually. I thought that the world is like a fantasy setting because in this world there is a war going on between gods, and there's talk of like magical creatures and just dangerous magical things and fantastical beings, but none of that really was introduced because they're just these 2 rival journalists that are working, and they don't actually have any contact with this whole like fantasy world aspect of it because they're kind of far away from the front lines of the war. So I thought it would be a lot more fantastical than it was, so I was getting bored honestly for about the first 100 pages. I'm now on page 150 and I'm liking it a lot more because the plot has shifted a little bit and we're getting a little bit more of the fantastical world and just the fantasy aspect of it, which I'm really enjoying. But yeah, at first it felt like it was set in almost the 1900s when like wars were happening here, and that was just throwing me off a lot because I wasn't expecting it. Honestly, I felt like I was going into a reading slump because I had read the first 50 pages and then I just did not feel like reading at all for like several days, just because I didn't want to go back into the story that I thought it was going to be and that it was becoming to me. But eventually I pushed through and now it's getting a little bit more interesting. With the romance, I don't actually know if I feel connected to it so far. They're like corresponding, like sure, the letters are written nice. I will say the writing of this book is good and I like how it's written and I like how the letters are written, but I just don't feel any emotional connection, I guess, because it's weird because our main characters are Iris and Roman. Roman is the male love interest and Iris is the main character, female main character. So Iris is talking to Roman, but she doesn't know it's Roman. She just thinks it's a stranger, and then Roman knows that it's Iris. I don't know how that worked, but Iris and Roman are communicating through letters, but they don't really like it's one-sided because Iris doesn't know that Roman is the one writing the letters to her. I don't know, I'm not feeling that much real romance kindling right now. Maybe that like changes in the future, but as of right now, like I think the writing is cool, I think it's beautiful, but I'm just not feeling a lot of the romance build up that I think the author is trying to put on the page. So definitely the experience reading this book for me has been a lot more interesting than I thought it was gonna be, because it was just not what I was expecting at all. But I'll keep going through. I hope more of the fantasy world like comes into fruition, because I have been really enjoying like the little snippets that we're getting with like the history of the world and like sort of the lore and the backstory of what's happening with the gods and the war and everything. So I hope we get more of that, and that we get more of the characters like having to confront this like magical war that's happening as well, which I think we will get. So we'll see. I think I'm like 40% of the way through, so I am almost halfway through. But I think there is potential for a lot of shit to go down in the second half. It's not bad, it's just a lot different than what I was expecting. So I finished Divine Rivals last night, and I ended up giving this book 3 stars, which is kind of disappointing because I really wanted to love Divine Rivals, especially because this was such a hyped book last year and everyone was loving it, everyone was raving about it, and so many people were giving it like 4 or 5 stars, and I really wanted to be in like that same boat, but I just did not end up liking it as much as everyone else. And honestly, like, I don't even know why people love this book so much. Truly, I am in my hater era this year because I'm just not liking, or like I'm just finding that a lot of books I'm reading are not like super amazing. They're like just okay. Anyway, things I liked about this book include the writing. I guess the writing was like, it wasn't super luscious and beautiful as people were saying. I will say like the letters were probably the most beautiful part, because those were a little bit more like poetic, because like, I don't know, people were it was like they were like love letters. People were pouring their hearts out to each other. But other than that, the writing was pretty like standard. The plot was kind of not even existent. Like, there was a magical war going on with gods and magical creatures, and I thought there could have been so much more done with that than what was done, because the war and everything was kind of in the background for most of the book until the very end, which is when it came like more to the front. I don't know, it was weird. It was mostly focused on Iris and Roman's story, which I get this is like a fantasy romance. Of course it's gonna have fantasy or have romance as like a big plot of it or a big part of it, but I just thought there should have been a little bit more with the plot for me to enjoy it. And Iris and Roman's story was literally the definition of insta love. There was no slow burn at all. So much happened in this book with this relationships that I'm not even understanding, because this book wasn't even that long. It was only 350 pages. Like, in a 350 page book, Iris and Roman are supposed rivals, which they weren't even that big of rivals. They like were rivals for like maybe 5 pages, and then they weren't rivals anymore. So there were rivals, and then they were starting to communicate, and then suddenly they like are falling in love through like 3 letters, and then they literally get married. Like, what? They go from rivals to getting married within the same book, and I'm like, how? There's no development to their romance. Even through the letters, like, they pretty much fell in love like immediately. There was no development. I guess there was supposed to be history because they were rivals, but there was so much of the relationships, I guess, that we didn't really see then, for us to like just see this part and then suddenly see them getting married. I don't know if that's a spoiler. I don't know. I'm like, why? I just did not like the way the romance played out, and I just wish that it was a lot more slow burn and that it would have saved a little bit of the development for the sequel. I don't know. Too much happened in this book in terms of the romance for me to like truly enjoy it. And again, like, the writing was just okay, and I think that there was like, this was such a good idea and the execution was just not as good as I was wanting it to be. I don't know. I just hoped I would enjoy it, but I just didn't. And honestly, I'm like, did I get a different book? Like, what? Why did I not like it as much as everyone else? But this was probably gonna go in like one of my most disappointing reads of the year, just because it was so hyped. I guess this is like the whole point of the video, is to watch, like, to read hyped books and then see what I think. But this was just so hyped and everyone was raving about it that I almost was like, oh yeah, I'm for sure gonna love this, because usually I like fantasy and fantasy romance, but this one was just, I don't know, it was just not executed well. And people, like, overall, I've seen the sequel has less, like, lower reviews. Like, people like the first book more than the sequel, and I am interested in reading the sequel just because of like how the last book ended, but I'm just scared now because I already didn't like this book, so am I even gonna like that book? So yeah, basically my thoughts are the romance was just way too fast for me. The way it developed was just too rushed for me, and the story, like, nothing happened for most of it, and then everything happened in the last like 50-ish pages, which wasn't even, and nothing ever truly felt that high stakes. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just disappointed with this one just because I wanted to love it way more than I actually did. But I guess not everything is gonna be a hit. Some things are gonna be misses. I'm glad I really like the 7-Year Slip, because this one was just a flop for me. Hello besties, I finished Yellowface last night and I got it from the library. I'm glad I don't own it, because is this really the book that y'all voted for the Goodreads Choice Awards? Anyone that follows me on Goodreads, you can probably see that I gave this book 2.75 stars. I was so severely disappointed by this one as well, and I was just expecting so much more than what it was able to offer ultimately. So if you've been living under a rock, Yellowface follows this girl named June Hayward, who is an author. She's been struggling. Her debut kind of flopped. She's just not doing like super well with her whole writing career. And then her friend Athena is this like Asian American author. She's been getting so much hype. Her books have been getting like so much praise and acclaim, and she's jealous of Athena. And one day Athena dies, so June decides to take Athena's manuscript that she's been working on and release it as her own, like publish it under her own name. So the book sort of follows her journey as she goes through and publishes this book and faces all of both the praise and the backlash that comes with, obviously. I don't know, for me, I just felt like this book felt really flat for me. It felt like it was a little bit juvenile in sort of the analysis and depth that it went to in talking about all these issues. One of the things that I did not like about this book is that it felt like it was almost a lesson on how the book internet space works, like book Twitter, just online book space, like different words and terms, which I get because not everyone knows that, but for me it just felt like it kind of took me out of the story, because the way the book is written, it's like she's the main character, June, she's white and she's talking to you, but in the middle she'll be telling about some situation in her life about what's happening, and then she'll pause and be like, by the way, this term from the book community means blah 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 blah. And I don't know, for me it just took me out of the story, and I just felt like what was being talked about with the whole social media thing was just too timely. I don't know, it just felt like a lot of it was just very rooted in today's time, and I could see that in the future, maybe like several years from now, that I guess social media isn't really going anywhere, but the way it's talked about maybe could change in the next few years. We never know. So I don't know, I felt like it just focused too much on, like, again, as people have talked about, Twitter discourse and online haters and how people interact with each other in the online book space. So yeah, that was one thing that just constantly took me out of the story. Another thing was that the writing was honestly, like, again, not that great. I didn't really like the writing style of the main character, like, talking to us as the reader as she's telling us her story through the book, and I just didn't like the way that was written, because it would just, again, take me out of the story when she would be referring to us, and I don't know, it just didn't feel super smooth and cohesive to me. The main character is, one thing I can appreciate, that the main character is written to be almost insufferable, which I know is very intentional, because she is this white woman that took this Asian women's writing, made it her own, changed a lot of it to be more palatable and more accessible to the white and American audience, and obviously she should get a lot of like backlash for that, which she did throughout the book, but the way she justified her actions and her reasoning for everything was just so infuriating, because you can see her thought process. She's like, she can she knows that what she's doing is not right, but then she just tries to justify it in a way that she ends up making herself feel better about it, because she's like, oh, I know it's wrong that I shouldn't be stealing Athena's work, but like, shouldn't her writing see the light of day? Like, isn't it a disservice not for her last thing to never be seen? So she kind of justifies all this stuff by like these random loopy reasonings. And the ending I just did not like at all. It was like, I could tell because on my Kindle I can see like what percent I'm at, and I was at 98%, and I was like, is this book really gonna end? Like, how is it gonna end? Because I felt like the story was going nowhere and there was no like, you know, like a punch like ending. And then the ending came and then nothing really happened. Basically the ending was that she kind of envisioned herself, so basically like a bunch of events happen in the book where she faces a lot of backlash and negative consequences of her actions, as she should, but then in the end she's like, I'm gonna write a book about everything and blah blah blah, it's gonna be sensational, I'm gonna sell it, I'm gonna make a lot of money, it's gonna be more like, it's gonna get more praise than the first book, everyone's gonna be like riveted and hooked. And then in the end she's basically just talking about how her life is gonna play out, not like, she hasn't actually done anything but the book, but she's just imagining what her life is gonna be like with this new book release, talking about everything that she's been through in the book Yellowface. So I guess it's a lesson that this kind of cycle of her taking other people's not tragedies, but other people's work and other people's and exploiting her own situation and kind of making it a whole sensationalized situation for the audience to consume like it was entertainment. So she's kind of using it to her advantage, which again kind of plays into the exploitation aspect of it. But it just felt like too much happened for it to just, because nothing really again happened. It was just, it ended. She was imagining what her life is gonna be like after she published this book that she hadn't even written yet, and then the book just ended. So yeah, I had a lot of issues with the book. I can acknowledge the good parts were that it was very uncomfortable to read. So R.F. Kuang did a really good job with sort of writing a very unlikable main character in a very intentional way, because we're not supposed to be rooting for her. We're really supposed to be like obviously seeing her as a bad character, but I think she did a pretty good job of writing a very unlikable character. But I had a lot of issues with it, so I don't know, this one was also a flop for me. I can see why people like this book though, because it is very accessible. The writing isn't very complex, it's pretty simple to read, pretty fast to read. It's just about 300 I want to say like 20 to 30 pages, so it's not too long either, which makes it like easy for a lot of people to read. So I can definitely see why it was popular and why a lot of people liked it. But just for me, I felt like there's a lot more critiques than things to like. I will not let this book deter me from R.F. Kuang's writing and books though, because I am really interested in reading her other works, which are the Poppy War series, which I still haven't read yet, and then Babel, I don't know how to pronounce that. So yeah, I'm still really interested in reading those. Based on the reviews I was reading on Goodreads, it seems like a lot of people are saying that her writing in those other books is a lot better and a lot more complex and a lot more like prose and stuff. So I will definitely be looking forward to that when I read that. But this one, I just didn't land that great with me and ended up being a flop. So yeah, that is it for this video. I have read 3 books. I read The 7-Year Slip, which I really enjoyed. I gave that one 5 stars. I love it. And then I read Divine Rivals, which I gave like 3 stars. Disappointing. And then I read Yellowface, 2.75 stars. Also disappointment. So we have 2 flops. Which was I expecting? No, because usually when a book is really hyped, I end up liking it. But maybe I just had too high of expectations for this one. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm like really sad. I really wanted to like Divine Rivals and Yellowface, especially because everyone was talking about them and they were on so many people's favorites lists last year. But I just did not end up enjoying it as much as I wanted. But please let me know down below if you read any of these books, as of course I would love to know. Did you like them? Did you hate any of them? I would of course love to know. But that is it for this video. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye.